Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in live, and hopefully somebody's listening to this in the future as well. I'm super excited to have Ryan on today. I've actually had the pleasure of meeting Ryan in the past, even though we're several years apart in the scholar history. But I thought we'd just start off like, Ryan, where did you grow up? What high school did you go to? When did you graduate? I think it was '02, but tell me.
Oh, two. Grew up in Phoenix, went to Thunderbird High School, and my year had two. We had myself and Alok Patki as scholars.
Uh-huh. And do you remember your mindset when you applied for Flynn and when you got it? Like, did you already have a clear direction? Like, I'm gonna get, if I get this, I'm taking it. What was going on with you at the time?
Yeah, I was really excited about it, and I didn't think that I would get it because Alok was like perfect SAT, perfect GPA, student body president, athlete, like just incredible person. He's a surgeon today. So I sort of thought that if anybody from my high school got it, Alok would get it. So I didn't think that I would get it. But I went to those info sessions and they were like, you should apply, and really glad that I did. I when I got it, actually was pretty straightforward for me. It was just a really compelling value prop, and I'd gotten into MIT, and maybe it should have been a harder decision, but I took the Flynn and never looked back.
It's interesting. That was the exact same thing for me. I had applied just to three different engineering schools. But for me, and I know you've got a little bit of the travel situation as well, like the idea that, first of all, I would have no student debt and that someone would actually pay me to get on a plane and go to a different country was like, there's no discussion. That's it. So I think for those of us listening, we probably all agree with that. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention, if you have questions as we go, throw them in the chat because we're going to try to keep the flow going. And then there's plenty of time at the end to do those. But like, I just want to grill Ryan because there's so much to get out of him. And so just feel free to put stuff there. Okay, so speaking of travel, you went to Budapest and you told me before that that kind of changed everything for you. What clicked for you on that trip?
Yeah, so I grew up in Phoenix, like the full stereotype, had an SUV, lived on a golf course in the burbs. And then I went to Budapest and saw great transportation and a great street life, where there were lively plazas, and it was clear that people were forming more connections. And that really showed me how much better cities could be. And I wanted to bring that back to the US. And Michael Young, who was running the program at the time, she was like, "Oh, you might be interested in urban planning." And I never really considered that. And that one thing led to another, but it did really feel like it started right there in Budapest.
Cool. And I know it's a little bit of a controversial topic, but you kind of did various unconventional things, and we're going to talk through your life. But you clearly had some early interest in real estate.
But I was interested in doing something entrepreneurial and was looking at different businesses, and doing the rental housing just seemed really interesting. And I was fascinated by real estate. And I think one of the reasons is that with real estate, you can do full right brain, full left brain. You could be buried in spreadsheets. You could be making something beautiful and artistic. You can do everything from huge scale to micro scale. And because it was accessible, where you can buy one house and learn the business that way, it feels like that's how I learned real estate, and sort of got lucky with the timing because it was a good time to buy, and ramped up a bit, and that led to greater things later. But yeah, it all kind of started because of that scholarship. Like the two scholarship things were capital to the real estate, and that Flynn trip really unlocked a lot of things.
Did you feel like, I mean, when you were thinking about buying this house, was it a risky thing to you? Like, were you worried or was it like clear? Like, where on the spectrum of like nervousness were you at the time by making that kind of decision?
Nervous, and it at the time, in hindsight, it was a really good time to buy. The mortgage payment was 580, the rent was 1400. There was also ability to do renovations to improve it. So in hindsight, it's a slam dunk, and you can make a big business just doing that over and over, and you can't find those deals anymore. Maybe a needle in a haystack. But at the time, it felt like, oh, this is really risky, anything can go wrong. And then things do go wrong, which is how you build confidence. So after the Flynn trip, I spent the rest of the summer in Mexico learning Spanish. And when the monsoon started, there was a leak in the roof, and the residents, who are our friends, were like, "Hey, it's flooding in the house," and I'm like, "My life is over," and that was very scary. Um, But it turns out that first of all, the friends were very understanding, which I'll always appreciate. But it turns out that it was a couple $1,000 repair, which was only a $500 insurance deductible. And I'm like, well, if that felt like the end of the world, and that was actually pretty straightforward, and also one of the ways of learning lessons of, oh, you have to inspect the roof before each monsoon season. And now those things are on checklists. But at the time, that was a big, maybe I thought it would be a wake up call, but it actually was a moment of like, oh, wow, we can handle these things.
Yes, is adversity actually shows you can do something about it, which is cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. Now, how much longer after U of A did you end up in Brazil?
So I did it right after I did a Fulbright. At the time, I was interested in becoming an economics professor, but even then, I was interested in transportation and urban planning. And there was a series of um, private sector buses that operated profitably. And I had interned at the UN and the World Bank. And this was fascinating to me in a world where things needed government subsidy, things needed grants. The fact that there were 15,000 vans in Rio that were operating profitably was really interesting. I was also excited about learning Portuguese and had been doing some ahead of time. And so that was what the Fulbright turned into. And it started on the transportation side, but then, and I lived in the nice part of town with a homestay for the first part. And it turns out that a lot of that transportation operates in the favelas.
Mhm.
And that led to living in one of the favelas for the second part of my time there, which I'm not sure I would do it again. But at the time, I was 23 and very risk taking. And my Brazilian friends wouldn't come visit me there. But for me, it was one of the most fascinating places and was inspiring for Culdesac in a different way because the whole thing functions without government. And there's no engineering. You have somebody, an engineer that didn't go to high school, shows up and says, "Yep, you can build another floor." And you get this very organic kind of neighborhood with streets as wide as sidewalks and lots of density. But what it enabled was lots of community. And it enabled also an entry point of low cost housing where you could get many more people living there and it made the whole city more vibrant. But what's interesting is that a lot of the people there actually eventually could afford to live elsewhere, but they preferred to stay there because the sense of community was so great and the vibrancy was so great there. And that really flipped housing on its side for me, and gave me another level of inspiration for building walkable places.
That's super cool. I did a favela tour slash stay, I don't know, 20 some years ago, as well. And what I find really interesting is that if you're local, you have way more knowledge, maybe is the thing, but you have way more fear about stuff. So like you said, friends of yours, like I wouldn't go there. If you go with someone who's from there and they take you through, and it's just the most rewarding experience. And I've done this in Mexico. I've done it in lots of different foreign countries. I'm not telling anyone to go risk your life, but I mean, there are definite cool, communities to be seen by going off the beaten path. And I think, Ryan, you've done that a lot. I have too. So that's a huge plus. Um, so clearly, you just honed more of this community vibe and, how how you think people would thrive living together. So it's pretty wild for me, that you went from there. Is that from there to McKinsey? Is it right
That's
around
right.
that time? So I think not everybody on this call will know what McKinsey is. And it's like, from my perspective, it's like a classic prestige track for hardworking, motivated people. And it's often, has a consulting boot camp reputation. So I'm curious, take us through how you end up there. What was that experience like? And what is that experience? What type of people is that good for?
Yeah, so I first heard about it because on the Flynn selection committee, they had one previous scholar, and it was a guy named Ian Larkin. And Ian, he'd actually just left McKinsey to go become a professor. He's now a tenured economics professor at UCLA, which is really good in the academic track. Um, and he was a big mentor to me and told me about it, where I said, "Hey, I'm really interested in being an economics professor, but I'm also really interested in business and want to see how that works. And even if I become a professor, I think it'll be really useful." And he sort of planted that idea in my head and also told me about how it's a door opener.
Hmm.
And the hard part's actually getting in. I think I was the first person from one of the Arizona schools to get into McKinsey. out of undergrad. Now it's more common. There's multiple Flynn partners. But at the time, and what's interesting is the hardest part is getting the interview. And I think that the Fulbright might have helped with that. But I saw it as a way to get great training and as a way to get great experience. So I spent 3 years there and had 7 different projects that were really different, working for a big computer company, working for a hotel chain, actually working for a casino chain, working for the Gates Foundation, working for a government agency in South Africa, working for a parastatal in Nigeria. And I was based in South Africa for a year. But for me, that was a great place because of the apprenticeship and mentorship and the things that happen out of that. So I used to, I think there's some alums and some current scholars, but I used to give this talk at what used to be ORM, the retreat place around the fast track careers. It was basically like the places that peers at Harvard and Stanford and whatever are going to that maybe aren't as well known in the Flynn. And it's changed over time. That it used to be consulting, investment banking, and high finance, and then now it's like throw startups in there, where these are not the only things, but these are like large categories of things that Flynn's initially maybe didn't pay enough attention to. And it's a good door opener for a wide variety of things.
Gotcha. Now, who is it not for?
Um, I mean, a lot of the folks that are going straight to med school, I've seen multiple people that started down that path that went into entrepreneurship. Um, Adil's one person that went down the entrepreneurship path, and now he's on his third startup and has made good money, but he did get his MD. But the ones that are like straight on, I want to be a surgeon, probably
Mhm.
just go straight towards it, right?
Yeah.
Um, if you want to be a professor, probably just makes sense to go straight for it. But I think that it's pretty broadly interesting for a lot of folks. And while I'm on the topic of the early career stuff, my suggestion to people is that this advice to follow your passion is actually terrible advice.
Mhm.
And the one book that I would read in your shoes, I read all the EQ books, like How to Win Friends and Influence People, but the one book for careers is like Be So Good They Can't Ignore You. The first half destroys the passion hypothesis, and the second part talks about skill building. And I think a lot of people that start with the passion then find themselves maybe looking, a little bit aimless when they're having a hard time breaking through for impact, as opposed to starting with skills leads to impact, which then leads to satisfaction and passion.
And a lot of studies actually show you end up being really happy when you're doing well at something.
Yeah,
So, you feel smarter, you feel, more accepted, you feel like you have an impact. So if you go with what your strong suit is, chances are it's correlated with something that's gonna make you feel passionate too.
yeah,
So I love that advice. Um, okay, there's this fun, so this is right around where Ryan entered my life in my office in New York.
yeah.
And we'll talk about networking a little bit later because I think that's one of my favorite things to advise people to do. And I think Ryan's a master. But you, the window, like I remember going the MTA,
Uh,
because the MTA is the Metropolitan Transit Authority. Is that right? That's the acronym. So it's like the subway system. And if you're in New York, or the bus and that kind of stuff, you never, there's never a case where you're like, oh, our system is awesome. Uh,
yeah.
and right now, if you're in social media this summer, you see water pouring through the subways and all that kind of stuff. So it's really interesting for someone like Ryan to, from my perspective, to go hang out at the MTA. So talk to us about that, because that's like, bureaucracies and so forth.
Yeah, well, the end of the story is that it was like when I reached my like cynical point about doing social and public sector stuff, which is not to say that you can't have a big impact, which is that like I didn't know how to have an impact in these places. So I went to the MTA. They hired somebody who was a partner at McKinsey to be the CEO, and I'm like, for transportation, maybe the coolest place in the world to go is the MTA. Now I would pick Waymo or something like that, but at the time it was the MTA, and I was like, take me with you. He's like, I can't pay you anything. I'm like, whatever, let's do it. And went there. And it was kind of sad in the sense of realize how hard it is to change things and just how messed up it is. And that a lot of the stuff is just structural, where one more smart person in the room is not at all the constraint. By the second half, I sort of figured out how to be somewhat effective and knew I was leaving. And so I ended up I ended up happy and learned so much. But that was the point where I realized that I was no longer going to do social or public sector stuff until maybe later in the career because I was at a loss for how to have an impact in those places.
And a corollary to that, when I worked at the World Bank for a while, I knew for me it was a temporary, like it wasn't a career decision. It was like even actually when I wrote my essays and stuff for grad school and Flynn and everything, I'm like, I just want to work for the World Bank and the IMF. Like, just send me in to make policies and help countries and that sort of thing. And then in reality, there's, like you said, an infrastructure and it can be difficult. But if you have the right mindset, like, I'm going to go in here, learn some stuff, find a way that I can impact the world, you can always leave and you're actually happier while you're there. I think being a career bureaucrat is very challenging for people who are used to having impact. So I wanted to throw that in. Anyways, so private equity. Again, I don't know that everybody on the call might have experience with private equity, but you have this, like, the next arc of your career is very, like, it's not stereotypical, but it's very specific and repeatable by a lot of people I've seen and know. And so I'd love to have you talk about, what does Bain Capital do? How'd you end up there? Again, what was you stayed there for a little bit. What did you learn and what made you go, oh, I like this entrepreneurship stuff and so forth?
Yeah, so Bain Capital is a private equity firm, which is, part of what you might call high finance, which is like private equity, venture capital, and hedge funds. And it's interesting that it's different now. It used to be that you needed to go into investment banking, so you do undergrad 2 years of investment banking and then get one of these high finance jobs. Now it's a lot different. You can get jobs out of undergrad. The same thing had happened before in consulting firms because before I got there, they only hired consultants at McKinsey, like out of grad school. And then they realized that undergrads were really good because talent happens early. Now the finance folks have figured that out. So now some of them are hiring straight out of undergrad. There's a Flynn last year that went straight to a VC/PE fund. So that's a new opening opportunity. But what private equity does is uh, well, actually, I'll tell the story of Bain Capital. So Bain Capital started from Bain and Company, which is one of the big three consulting firms. So the top strategic consulting firms are McKinsey, Bain, and BCG. And if you're trying to get into that industry, I'd suggest looking at one of those three things. In the 80s, some partners at Bain and Company, the consulting firm, they were like, hey, we're giving advice to these companies and they really should listen to us. They could create a lot of value. They're paying, we're making good money as consultants, but they would make so much money if they would just listen to us instead of just look at our slides and make some recommendations. So they're like, we're going to raise our own money and buy the companies. And then they did. They did really well. And then those kind of strategic insights. Well, what they do is they actually take a company, sometimes from the private markets, sometimes from the public markets, and they bring it private, create the right capital structure with debt, and then run it efficiently, and then try to sell it. And so if a company's not working effectively, they can generate really strong returns by running it right, and then return it to the private markets and get the right multiple for it. You know, all these opportunities get competed out over time. So in the 80s, it was very easy and very rudimentary. In the 90s, it was, relatively straightforward strategic things. And then in the 2000s and definitely by the 2010s, it was like pretty complicated. So it's not, it's still a big industry, but it's a little bit different than it used to be. But it pays very well, which actually for me wasn't what made me happy for it. But it was really good training to understand that kind of thing.
So did you work within a specific sector or what was your
Yeah, so it's a generalist fund, so they do deals, and then when you buy the company, now you're running the company. Healthcare is one of the biggest things that they did. Like when I was there, they owned HCA Healthcare, which runs a third of the hospitals in the whole country. There was a helicopter investment that did medical helicopter flights. Toys R Us was one of the not successful investments. So those were some of the things that we did that I worked on.
So now then you head into entrepreneur land for real. So I'm kind of torn between, and I want you to decide which way to take. the discussion, but I mean, because like cul-de-sac, you told me is like your life's mission. But you had a step before cul-de-sac. So I'm happy if you just jump into like, what is your life's mission and how did you affect that? Is that something that kind of came to you recently, or has it just been building up? Is Open Door part of it? I'd just love to hear how you look at that part of your life.
Yeah, there's one step in between, which is most relevant because it's like when I figured out like what I want to do with
Yes.
my life.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, like most people at Bain Capital want to go to business school, and it's like get into Harvard or Stanford or don't go. And I got into HBS, and I started there, and I was 30, which is actually pretty old for the class. The average is like 26 or something. You can actually get into HBS straight out of undergrad now. Um, the but I there is when I realized I call it the quarter life crisis, which maybe happened a little late for me, or I'm going to live to 120. I don't know. But the realizing that like, oh, you're not young forever, and you have to cut off paths. So I was somebody that saw myself as very intellectually curious of lots of different things, and that's where I like really honed in on like it's about real estate and transportation, and those two things work really well. So I'd always been interested in those, and then like really fully honed in on just that overlap. And there were two things that were happening. One was I had a lot of conviction around Lyft and Uber quite early that they were going to be huge and transformational. And so I was looking into doing something there that would have been, like the first 100 people. But I had done this real estate, and the person that I did it with, he was my college roommate, was starting a company called Open Door. And about Thanksgiving of business school, he's like, "Hey, I think that there was a couple things. It was either I was going to be CEO of one company that I ended up advising on but not doing, or the founding team at Open Door." And so started working on that. Almost dropped out of business school like in the second semester, but and did drop out after the first year. And that was a very intense 4 year period um, of starting a company. It's now publicly traded. It's actually a very interesting time at Open Door. It's randomly become a meme stock, and
No kidding. I didn't realize that.
oh, it's full on meme stock.
Lord.
It's like there's been multiple days in the past month that it's been like the top or second highest trading volume. Um, it was more than 10% of all stock market trading volume because there's this hedge fund guy that's becoming an activist, and it's really interesting.
Yeah.
But actually, the CEO resigned on Friday because of retail investor pressure. It's a new era with all this like Wall Street bets, kind of things like that. But again, I've been gone from Open Door for 7 years, but
Right.
Open Door was a very interesting and intense journey for me. So if it's interesting, I can talk about some of the insights there, or I can talk about just why that was the time that I got the conviction to do cul-de-sac.
I like the latter.
Okay.
Conviction, because you know what? So many people search for conviction and they're wondering, how will I get conviction? Is it something I can work to get? Does it just land on my lap one day by, the angels shining on me, or what? So your story of conviction, I think, would be really interesting.
Yeah, so there's inspiration and conviction. The inspiration was going back to like Flynn trip Europe, bringing old Europe to the US and all of the social impact benefits, right? Where there's this wonderful coincidence. And this is where the conviction is that there's a wonderful coincidence that more people living in walkable neighborhoods or able to live in walkable neighborhoods moves the needle on all the social impact metrics, right? Whether that's health, happiness, climate, low cost of living, low taxes, like whatever impact measures people care about, it really matters about walkable neighborhoods. And there's this wonderful coincidence that people will actually pay a premium. So at Open Door, which I think has some of the best data in real estate, the neighborhoods that were built before cars were just doing better,
Hmm.
and people wanted to live there. And the um, talking to many customers, the phrase you'd hear the most often is cute. People would say they wanted to live somewhere cute, and
Hmm.
started figuring out what that meant. And it meant that they wanted to be like near a coffee shop where they would know their neighbors with thoughtful architecture, where it was safe on the streets. And I realized that cute meant walkable. And there was a massive multi-million deficit of how many walkable homes people want in the US. And that, you know, the majority of people want to live in a walkable neighborhood and fewer than 10% do. And it's just because we're not building enough. And it's a little bit of a chicken and egg where when you build sprawl, uh, it makes sense to build that. And there's other reasons why we do that. But because of the transportation innovations that have been happening over the last 15 years, it was possible to build walkable neighborhoods again in the US. And doing that is how we were going to move the impact measures and get people to be inspired by cul-de-sac or copy it, because it's going to lead to a big impact. So thought it could work, and if it's profitable, it's going to scale. We have ambitions ourselves, also want everyone else to build like this, cities to allow building like this. Um, and now we're at a point where we've got many residents, and we went from getting laughed out of the room at the beginning to now people want to learn from us.
Well, so talk about cul-de-sac for, I mean, I'm guessing a lot of people know if they've looked you up or if they live in Arizona, if they follow Flynn stuff, they see what you're doing. But tell us your elevator pitch, what cul-de-sac is
So
currently.
we're a developer and neighborhood manager that builds walkable mixed-use neighborhoods. And we design for a culture of belonging, transportation freedom, and thriving local retail.
And anyone who's started a company on any size know it's so much challenge, like the amount of hills you have to climb and the no's that you get are extreme, like yeses and no's. So Ryan, what was the hardest part about launching either company, but cul-de-sac since it's your baby?
I think that um like that getting out of the laughed out of the room, and it can manifest in different ways. You could describe it as different ways, is really hard for some people, right? Like some people describe it as being willing to have like temporarily significant, like substantially lower status, and some people just can't do it. And every good startup idea out there has had really smart people telling that person they're an idiot. And if you
Mhm.
can't stomach that and work through that and be stubborn or persistent or tenacious through that, then you can't be a founder.
You just
And
can't make it.
and you have
Yeah.
to push through it knowing that that person's probably right. Most startups do fail.
Mhm.
And then if it does, you have to live with that too. But it has the opportunity to really change things in the world. And big breakthrough companies, things like Lyft, things like Waymo, have the chance to really have an impact on the world.
So do you think, you know, what would you say if you were describing a person, and because there's no right or wrong on what someone does in their journey, like so when my daughter started her company, it helps to have this, like you said, tenacity and belief in yourself. And like if you really believe in your product, that is the number one thing that'll get you through, in my opinion. But it's also okay to work for other people. I mean, you've worked in a lot of different environments now, public, private, you name it. Um, Once you've been an entrepreneur, though, it's hard to go back. Would you say you'll would have a hard time ever working for someone again?
Maybe I right now I'm just uh, obsessed with cul-de-sac, where I just see this is what I always wanted to do. Feel lucky that I got to do it, and can see myself doing this forever.
So
Um,
bring that to the mission, because you told me, what was you said something like, it's the vehicle. It's, and it can, you envision it doing more than this. So tell us about your life's mission. Is your life's mission you encapsulated in your pivotal moment, like making the impact, the social impact, or how do you see that? And how do you want to grow cul-de-sac?
uh, we want to make cities better, and some of that is by us directly building, and like that's kind of directly getting the impact, and then also by showing others a way forward. Where given how big the real estate industry is and how capital intensive it is, just cul-de-sac Tempe is over $100 million project, right? And it's a drop in the bucket of filling the walkable housing need. And so, we knew that it was important to change others, for cities to change their policies, and for other developers to realize that this is a better way to build, and
Okay.
to show customers that like you're going to love living here. And when people visit, that's when they really get that aha moment. And
So
we want to build larger, ideally. Like the big grand career vision is building something that can be city scale. Because at 17 acres, I mean, that's a large real estate project. You can, make it car free and design it and, place make. If you go significantly bigger, now you can create more transportation network level decisions that make things more efficient, lower cost of living, even healthier, even happier. So we're hoping to do something larger.
One thing I wanted to talk about that's linked to the entrepreneurship stuff is stress. And
Yeah.
so a lot of Flinn scholars, including myself and you and pretty much most people I know, we get ourselves stressed, whether it's we're in school or we're in work or we're taking on big challenges and stuff. Um, you'd mentioned that live electronic music was a
Yeah.
really good something that you discovered that helped you recharge and deal with pressure, and I love it. I was hoping you would just talk about like what advice you give, because I mean we have the whole spectrum, like current students, alumni, but like even people like me have kids who have pressure, so I think everyone on this call can always share, how do I cope with pressure? Tell us a little bit about electronic music and that.
Yeah, it's for me and something that I was always interested in it, but I never really had like my friend groups never really were into it. And so I relatively, like after COVID really is when I discovered that, oh, going to see live electronic music was like very like cathartic for me. And I'm like, 6'5" and awkward. So like I never would dance in any like dancing situations. But for some reason, at an electronic music show, it's like, oh, I found that I actually really like dancing. And part of the reason why it works there is because people aren't looking at me in the way that, if you're at a homecoming dance in high school or something. Um, and then I just, I checked my steps on the health meter afterwards, and I was like, wow, that was like a workout.
That worked.
And yeah, and it's like just focusing on the music for a bit of time. And I don't think it's like something for everybody, but for me, it's like I'd probably go once a week, and was, like helped me just detach from everything for that amount of time.
Yeah. Moral of the story, there is a way to detach, even if you don't think you can, you can find one.
I also found that even though it's somebody described it as there's recreation and construction, which is like even though it's fun, I would actually like have lots of good work thoughts during it in an interesting way where it would um, help me see things from a different perspective because of the emotions in the music or something like that.
Cool. I do want to know, because I am in Boulder. I have two bikes. I do not have an e-bike, and I've heard through the rumor mill that you are like the master of e-bikes. Is this true?
I have a lot of e-bikes. Although I lost most of them because actually we had an office in downtown Tempe on 7th Street, and it actually got demolished today. It's kind of an emotional
Ah,
thing, because they're making it into a large tower. It's creative destruction. But we were there for 4 years and it was wonderful. And also was part of why it helped us hire so many Flinn Scholars because we were like right there on campus. I've hired 10 Flinn Scholars. We had 7 at the company at one time. And well, anyway, the office is no more. Um, but yeah, you were asking about,
yeah. So like, what e-bike should I be
oh, yeah,
buying?
what e-bike? So I had like
Or
six
any of us?
e-bikes there. Now I
Yeah.
have fewer. The simple thing is if you want something entry level, get electric.
Uh,
Electric is the Gorilla. They're now over a quarter of all e-bikes in the country, and they're based here in Phoenix.
ah,
And the company's only 6 years old. Founders went to Grand Canyon University, and because of being really effective competitors and understanding the global supply chain, they've dominated their industry. So pick the one
cool.
that you like and buy that. If you want to spend more than an entry level price, then ping me and I'll give you more complicated advice. But the simplest one is pick the electric you like.
Perfect. Yeah, it's like we asked, Jay Bear gave us these tequila tips, and I'm like, I hear that you're the e-bike tipper.
Yeah.
So you're the connoisseur. All right, do we have any questions?
I'm Rati Tabataze. I'm a 25 scholar at ASU. I was actually at Culdesac a couple of months ago. I got to talk to Ryan a little bit, but I mean, I just take a big interest in everything that's going on with Culdesac. And you mentioned a lot about, things with city policies being an issue for reaching the goals of walkable cities and neighborhoods. So I just wanted to hear more about what type of experience have you had working with different city stakeholders when it comes to getting Culdesac to where you want to have it, whether it's policymakers and existing city policy or even other businesses, residents, what kind of issues have come up and how have you been able to resolve that as you built Culdesac to where it is now?
A lot of people that talk about housing policy, they're really only focused on their area. And if that's the reality, then it's like talking about their area. What you'll find is that a lot of the people that are talking about the housing policy live in the areas where it's the hardest to do things. And we sort of took the opposite approach, where the company was started in San Francisco. After graduating high school, did U of A, and then I was gone from Arizona for 15 years, and came back. And uh, the we were based in San Francisco, and we knew that they weren't going to allow this. We would not be built today. And so we looked all over the country for places where it could work. You always need to have job and population growth to do a large new project. You need to have what we call a forward-looking government that welcomes growth. I need to find the right piece of land. And we found all those things in Tempe, where, you know, in this business, there's like not one person that can just say, yes, you can build, but there's many people who could say no. The fire department can say no, the sanitation department can say no, the mayor can say no. And so, and it's hard to get clarity, but we engaged with stakeholders to understand what was important to everyone and put forth a plan that people could get behind. And the whole reason to do it was to prove that it can work. And in real estate, it's a very hard to change and stodgy industry. People always ask a lot of questions when you're doing something new. But now we can point to our own stuff, and we can also let other people point to us as the reference project. And so Tempe was, finding Tempe was a wonderful place. And there's lots of places that we couldn't go because we couldn't find those things.
Well, great question.
Yeah, I have a question. My name is Chloe. I'm a 2024 scholar, and thank you both so much for this discussion. It's been really insightful. Um, Ryan, at the beginning of the call, you said that you build confidence when things go wrong. And I wanted to know if you have any tips on when things do go wrong, how you can kind of get back on your feet and believe in yourself so that you actually do build that confidence.
That's a good one. Um, Being more tenacious is like a big one, and realizing that those things are like some of it is like just logic and seeing through it. And I think that a lot of people like find strength in themselves they didn't know they had in those moments. And thinking ahead. And then one thing that I wish were easier that I think is important that I still am like, gosh, how can I do that better? Which is learning lessons through other people. There's like nothing like making a mistake yourself to learn. But as much as possible, like learning through other people, whether that's through like biographies or really understanding people that I think can go a long way. It's hard. And then when you make a mistake yourself, you're like, I wish I would have learned it from that person.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to add, even though you didn't ask me, I'm going to add, since I'm older, I'm going to add a few bits of my own history. I think a lot of it is like realizing it's not actually the end of the world. And one of the useful exercises to do is when you feel like it's the end of the world, write down like the worst thing that could happen. Because it's really not death in most cases. I mean, okay, but like it's not. Your house burns down. That's really awful. So what's the worst thing? You have to like move, you have to downsize, but because your brain is wired to like react to fear. And so to me, like when you're in that mode, realize that fear is governing a lot of your emotional reaction. And then actual action is what combats the stuff. So you give yourself the time to marinate in the worry that you need, but then do something. And making a forward step really helps you get out of it faster. I'm in Seattle, where we have a similar public transport system as the Valley of the Sun. I've heard of Culdesac before, which is why I called in. Huge issue with walkable neighborhoods and how they are or aren't activated by LR stations. Doesn't seem like a from scratch cul-de-sac development's in the cards. How would you advise areas in this situation based on your experience in Tempe to date? Public, private sector, mix? What do you have in your mind on this?
So I'd probably be more optimistic. So Seattle is interesting. So Seattle, I believe, is now over 20% car free. So it's a place where you know there's network effects here, people knowing each other and getting role models for car free. And the tailwinds of this business with these trends, they're getting stronger every year. It's only 2 years now that Waymo has really been operating. And at first you saw certain types of riders that were the early adopters. Right now it's parents, and they're like, oh, I can send my kid to school, and you get the most effusive praise from parents being like, I send my kid to school and I have my freedom back. And that's now normalized. And this is only going to continue, and we're on the cusp of Waymo creating many millions of car-free Americans. I used to be, so in college, I was like, Rail's fantastic. And Phoenix worked announcing the rail system when I was in high school, and building it during college was inspirational. But I'm like, this takes a long time and it costs a lot of money. And I was inspired by bus rapid transit, which sort of came from Brazil, which is take a road, make it just for buses. You can implement it overnight, and then it works almost as good as rail. And I was like, oh, we're going to do this faster. That was 20 years ago. Not only have we not built much rail in this country, we also haven't built much bus rapid transit. And so that's one of the reasons why AV ride hail is such a magical technology, is because it's more or less perfectly compatible with today's built environment, and it can directly outcompete cars at a much lower price. And so I'm a lot more optimistic on the ability to do this, but also not everything has to be completely car free. We're doing a project in downtown Mesa, and it's not going to be completely car free. And this is not just about going from 1 to 0. This is also about transitioning in a multi-year time period to car free. And you could also choose the right location. I'm sure there's lots of areas of Seattle that are much harder, but there's probably some that work really well too. We haven't specifically looked at it, but if you come across a site, send it our way.
Hi, Ryan and Sarah. My name's Catherine. I graduated from the U of A year ago, and since then I've been working for the Regional Transportation Planning Agency out here in San Diego.
All right.
And so here, like as in a lot of cities, there's the housing crisis and needing to build more units, but then I hear a lot of complaining from a lot of people in my life, strangers and people I know, about that, but there's going to be so much traffic.
Right.
And I'm like so excited about like this intersection of housing and transit that I feel like if I had time to like sit down and really explain it, that I could get more people on that same page. But what I was curious to hear from you is like, what's your elevator pitch for kind of like building that political imagination in people who are skeptics of more dense neighborhoods and other types of transportation besides cars? Just like your couple-minute pitch of how you can get strangers on board.
Well, first, thanks for your service. That's great that you're there working, and moving the needle at places like that can really change places. It feels like these kind of things are slowly, then all at once. And right now, there's so many obstacles to building car free, or in many places building at all. But people are eventually realizing that building more great spaces makes cities better, and you can have more amenities, and you can have less traffic. I'm giving a talk in Aspen next week about this, where it's saying that we can have attainable housing in a way that adds less traffic if we build the right kind of things. And I mean, the biggest elevator pitch is come to Culdesac. And when people see it, they're like, oh, this is wonderful. And they can feel why it's better and why people could enjoy living here. And that changes things, and cities move slowly. It's a risk-averse business. But you're seeing big changes now. And you've got cities and states that are eliminating parking minimums, like the high cost of free parking. Is a book that came out when I was in college that is very inspiring for me. And I think that message is getting out because of lots of small actions by people that care and people that get it, like yourself. So thanks for doing what you do.
Yeah,
I
thank
love
you. That was really helpful.
I love having like, especially since you're in that area, having those bullet points ready and rehearsed, and then you can deliver it every time you get the chance in a consistent way, and it does get through. So cool. Okay.
Can I piggyback on that? Like you teed up my question perfectly. And
Great.
Catherine, good to see you again. I'm Kyle Dalton with Class of '99, and I'm here in the city planning office in Denver, where I manage our team who
Oh
work on
yeah.
zoning reform. 2 weeks ago, we eliminated parking minimums in the city of
Yes.
Denver, and we're expanding multifamily housing and single family neighborhoods and all the rest. But my particular question for you, it sounds like you got lucky with all the factors coming together in Tempe. And so at first, I guess I was curious about how do you scale, but I guess more specifically, like the primary barrier we hear from folks who are doing this development, who get it, who are values aligned, we've got land, it's finance. It's like, oh, sorry, the bank's making me put the parking in. Like they're not
Oh yeah.
creative enough to work with me.
Oh yeah.
Maybe could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I could write a book on this one. Well, thank you for your
Okay.
service as well. Thank you for your service as well. And these things are changing. The way that I think about it is that for any new concept in real estate, first there's a new concept penalty. Everybody asks more questions. It's harder to get approval. It's harder to get financing. There's debt. There's equity. Also, as a baseline, development sucks. You have to sign guarantees. There's all this pre-dev risk. The best case scenario is you do a project successful, and generally speaking, people don't like developers. But if it goes poorly, you don't get any sympathy. So it's generally a really tough business. But the being willing to show that this works, and like we dealt with some of these new concept penalties, now it's moving towards parity, and eventually it's going to be a new concept premium where, we've planted the seed in banks and investors that like if you're investing in structured parking right now, you're making a big mistake, and they're starting to get that. And the big question now, it's gone from we got laughed out of the room because people said you wouldn't get entitlements, the demand won't be there. And what are you talking about? AV ride hail is going to create millions of new car free people in our lifetime. Now all those things have happened. It's almost becoming a consensus opinion that Waymo is going to go everywhere. And you've got banks and things asking the question of how do like maybe we shouldn't be investing in structured parking. So it's eventually going to go to a penalty. And this is why developers are like really interested in what we're doing. So yeah, it's a lot harder to do these things. Also, it's a lot harder to get financing in general, not just for these kind of projects. It's just the barrier it's a very capital intensive industry, unfortunately. So, most like 90% of the multifamily projects in the entire United States are currently blocked because of high interest rates, high construction costs, and these kind of things. So it's not even just about this kind of project. So, but yeah, it's harder to do it like this for now. But if you're ahead of the trend, then you're on the other side of it too. And
I'm wondering, specifically in Colorado, this recent deal that I don't remember which entity, but it was a government entity that formed. It's something to do with arts that end up partnering to buy the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park. And so these kind of interesting deals with public-private partnerships, I'm not giving an opinion. I happen to know about the deal in more detail, but like I'm seeing some innovative stuff happening in the financing space, specifically in there, because like Ryan said, it's very expensive. So interest rates are high right now. If you're a developer and if you're a new developer, it's like multiple hundreds of basis points. Then you throw a construction loan on top of that, it's even worse. But if you can get a coalition with the government and a government entity and or insurance companies, for example, because like the big insurance companies and pension funds want long maturity real assets. And the hard part is getting everybody to talk together. But I think like that is one of the innovative ways that's happening right now in the situation where financing is not cheap or plentiful.
Hey, a question for you, Ryan. You've talked a lot about the kind of role model being a reference project and getting that momentum behind something that's kind of seen as a new concept. I wonder if you've thought about in scaling up, like, is there something that you see a need in helping people see like, oh, this is what I want when I say I want something cute, since people's minds probably often go to cute and historic, cute and built before car infrastructure. How do you look at that sort of, having something new, but also appealing to, customers that may not think they want something new?
Yeah, a lot of the interest in historic stuff is because that was the walkable, that was the good stuff, like row houses and things like that. A lot of these neighborhoods that are historic, it's actually just illegal to build that way again. Like row homes in New York or Boston or something, like you're not allowed to build that way anymore. Hopefully that will change. But there's always a backstory to some of these things. I don't think that we'll have nostalgia for the cookie cutter suburban sprawl homes anytime soon. But marketing is or branding or storytelling is a big part of what we do. And like we're the #1 real estate account on TikTok, for example. And getting the message out there and showing people that you can live car free or find walkable places and that you might really like this matters and that you can live that way now. One of the hardest parts about getting people to go car free is actually getting them to just like do the math, because there's these social things. Like if you show up at a dinner party in a Lyft today and it's $25 each way, people are like, what are you doing? Like, how could you spend that much? But then you say, like, how many dinner parties do I go to a month? And yeah, it would have been $3 instead of $50 to take if I had a car. But the fixed costs means that the average American spends over $1,000 a month. So when we talk about affordability, it's actually housing and transportation together. Those are the two biggest buckets of spend for households, and together they're over half. And like, yeah, New York has got expensive housing and cheaper transportation. And Phoenix has cheap housing, but more expensive transportation that kind of offsets it. And you can get New York quality neighborhoods at Phoenix type of prices if we just build them again. So we should want to show people that and tell that story.
Awesome.
So hi, Ryan. 2015 Flynn at ASU. I know that we worked on a project briefly many years ago at this point. I'm a recently appointed Washingtonian and a lover of the WMETA. And I've been car free for 3 years, happily. I'm curious, what have the roadblocks been in DC? Just because to me, it seems like there's rows and rows of vacant office buildings that could probably be converted. And it's just like, in my mind, I'm like, DC just feels like the next place. So I'm curious what the roadblocks have been in DC for you all.
We haven't spent a lot of time looking at DC. In the metro area, there's one place that we've looked at. A lot of things have to go right for a project to happen. And so it's not like it's worse than other places. I think that there's a lot of potential in DC. And do you still call it WMATA, the rail?
Yeah, I hear it both ways, and I'm at the point where I'm too afraid to ask like what the actual is.
I don't know either. Anyway, I spent a summer in DC, but it has lots of potential. I mean, I think that it's a really good market for scooters. It'll be good for e-bikes. I think that Waymo will thrive there.
Yeah.
And right there to influence all the politicians to take it more broad. So bullish on DC. I know they've got like DC proper, and challenges of building just like other places. They've got a lot of the housing there is, you're not allowed to build anymore. Like a lot of the great neighborhoods people want to live in are effectively illegal now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if you ever need, any sort of connection in DC, you have one here now. So
let's do it.
Yeah.
Which actually, I'm going to jump in. One of the things I think Ryan is, like I said, one of the impressive connectors, just because I've been on a two-way connecting, like we helped each other out. And to me, it's just natural to reach out to the Flynn alumni community and see what people are doing. It's super exciting to me. Ryan, like, what do you have to say to people on, like, they might be nervous, they might like not come to their mind, but like you've employed a lot of Flynns as well. So this community is really been useful to you?
Oh yeah, like yeah, networking is not just, people think of it as like, oh, I'm going to find this like really senior mentor. It's upward, it's lateral, it's downward, right? Like being able to hire great people in your career matters. Being able to partner with people really matters. And people habitually underestimate the value of networks. And people are excited to reach out. And I was always a little bit socially awkward, and like I never would have thought that I was a good networker. Like in hindsight, I'm like, okay, I guess I used it better than others. But for me, it was always like some anxiety to reach out. And the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, was really helpful for me to inspire me that it's worth it. And then when I tried, like I asked Matt for a list of Flynn alums, there was like 400, and you stuck out right away. It's like, oh, I got to talk to her. And I was like, I don't know, like, am I interrupting her in New York during her day? And you were like excited to talk with me and super helpful. And I think some of that is you. I think that you're fantastic, and it's part of why you're giving back here. But I think that it's there's lots of Flynns that will be excited to hear from you, to share what they learned, because we've all gone through lots of things, and people love telling their story. And also, when you meet somebody, like you become invested in them like a good book. And also following up. When somebody reaches out because they need something, it's still exciting to talk to them, but it's even better if you send them one note every 2 years that just is like, hey, here's how things played out. It's really great to hear those.
And the worst thing that can happen is they don't answer you, or they say, no, I'm too busy. So, I mean,
Right.
really not a horrible outcome, in terms of like, it's even easier than dating, right? So you just like, and you have an in. So, I mean, I whether you're graduated and you're an OG class like me, or you're a current student, we have this massive group of awesome people doing really cool things. And you can go on the website, and if they've put their information, which a lot of people do, you might find like your new best friend in town. Like we're trying to do these get-togethers now in different cities. So I want to put a plug in for that. It's just really fun. And I'd say most people I'd say every single person that I've encountered in the Flynn community really would like to help if they can. So I just want to throw that in because I think Ryan has benefited, I have benefited, and we have a collegial relationship because of that. So, all right, well, we are officially out of time, and I am so grateful, Ryan, for you spending the time with us today. And are there any lot to sign off? Like, is there a book that, you mentioned one book, but like, what are you reading right now, or any podcasts that you think we should all check out because it's neat in any respect? It doesn't have to be real estate oriented.
Some books for urban planning are Order Without Design, Walkable City, Happy City, and then again, So Good They Can't Ignore You, for general career stuff.
Great. Okay. All right, everyone. Thank you.